All right, we're going to get going now. So welcome to the North American Fruit Explorers 2024 virtual conference. While people are coming in, I'm going to provide the session preamble. If you've attended a few sessions, this will sound familiar, but some of you, this might be the first session you're joining for the conference, or you're going to be watching the recording after the fact. So my name is Matt Stevens, and I'm a volunteer board member at NAFEX, as we call the organization for short. I'll be serving as a facilitator for this session, the Ecological Orchard, a no-till, no-spray, selective weeding, grow-your-own-fertilizer system for organic orchards. Before I introduce today's keynote speaker, I would like to share a few housekeeping items and a little bit about NAFEX as we allow a few more people to join. First, this is a webinar, so unlike Zoom meetings, your audio and video features are automatically disabled. You'll notice that you can chat with other participants, and we encourage you to do so. Drop links into the chat or other relevant content. Second, we encourage you to ask questions. Please use the Q&A tab in Zoom to ask topical questions or technical support questions from our co-hosts. If you have technical questions, please also feel free to put that in the chat. But again, questions in the Q&A, chat in the chat. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to members and conference participants after the conference at nafex.org, along with bonus resources like printable versions of our speakers' presentations. Just a few words about NAFEX for those who may be joining us for the first time. Founded in 1967, the North American Fruit Explorers is a network of individuals throughout the United States and Canada devoted to the discovery, cultivation, and appreciation of superior varieties of fruits and nuts. NAFEX members share ideas, information, experiences, and fruit propagating material via our website, social media channels, fruit-specific interest group meetings, and annual conferences like this one, whether in person or online or both. As a paid NAFEX member, you get 4 editions of the Pomona Journal each year, as well as the ability to search 50 years of Pomonas in our digital library, which contains a wealth of fruit growing information. If you haven't already, we encourage you to visit our website to learn more at nafex.org. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. A mentor of mine once told me that if you ever have a chance to look at someone's book collection and you want to know the books that are truly the best, you should look for the ones that are the most beaten up. And so if you look at my collection, 2 books will stand out on my shelf as by far the most beaten up, and these are the 2. So I got the Holistic Orchard and the Ecological Farm, and these are both fantastic books that in the video, they look much better in the video than they actually are in real life. And so they are both fantastic books that I continuously reference, and they're beaten up and dog-eared. And so I'm really excited to have Helen as our keynote speaker. And over the course of the conference, we went through really deep dives, fantastic deep dives on specific fruits and berries and nuts and growing with limited space. And so it's great that today we were able to zoom out with both Allison and Helen and really think about the whole operation of the orchard and the context and how to grow in ecological ways. So today, our keynote speaker is Helen Athau. Helen Athau is author of the newly published book, The Ecological Farm, a minimalist, no-till, no-spray, selective weeding, grow-your-own-fertilizer system for organic agriculture. She has worked for 35 years to connect farming, food systems, human and crop nutrition, land stewardship, and conservation. Helen has operated, owned, and cooperated with her late husband on 3 certified organic orchards and vegetable farms, ranging from 30 to 211 acres in 3 states, California, Montana, and Oregon. She currently farms and does no-till soil and natural enemies habitat building research on her new 5-acre farm in western Montana. Her on-farm research includes ecological weed and insect suppression, reduced tillage systems, managing cover crops and living mulches for soil and habitat building. She is a contributing writer to the Organic Gardener's Handbook of Natural Pest and Disease Control and other books. She has served as a board member for the Organic Farming Research Foundation. Helen has a master's degree in horticulture from Rutgers University and has worked in education and research at the University of Arkansas Fruit Experiment Station, from an earlier session called back there, Rutgers University, and Oregon State University. She has served as a horticulture extension agent in Montana for 17 years, where she annually taught an organic master gardener course and ran an IPM program for nurseries and landscapers. With that, it is my absolute pleasure to hand over to Helen Athau for our keynote presentation.
Thank you. What an honor to be invited to speak with one of my favorite groups, fellow nerds. This is wonderful. And thank you for putting me in the same category as Michael Phillips, one of my heroes. So I am going to get all this set up here. Let's see. Okay. It should all be set up now. And there is the title of the talk, which is kind of a mouthful, and photos of the orchard in Oregon, which I'm going to spend most of the time talking about, but I will throw in some vignettes from the more commercial orchard in California and the new place in Montana. So I started out with what I call conventional organic production, where I did a lot of input substitution. I had worked at Rutgers University in the Rutgers Integrated Pest Management program for tree fruits, and I was really good at tweaking the parts. And then I started doing this more holistic approach. And here's my new model. Rather than striving to make more money by increasing yield, using lots and lots of mined materials and water and nutrients from off-farm sources, what if I focus on saving money by reducing inputs? And I want to tell you as I go through these slides, because I know you're NAFEX nerds, I'm going to throw in some of the names of the varieties of my favorite things that are on screen, and I hope that won't make it confusing, but I'm going to do it anyway. So there's Snow Queen Nectarine. So rather than striving to make more money, how about reducing inputs and creating systems that sponsor their own fertility? And their own pest suppression. And while we do all of this, let's eat our own highly nutritious food that also saves us money, keeping us out of the medical system. What a paradigm. There's my Flavorella pluot that I love and the Sweet Cap Donut Peach. So my late husband and I started looking at this nutritional side of things on the orchard in California. And here's the results of a little experiment where we looked at O. Henry peach fruit tissue mineral comparisons of 3 long-term certified organic farms at the San Francisco, California farmers market. And what we found was that Woodley Farm O. Henry peaches had the highest mineral content, including manganese and boron and zinc. So, I'm whoops, it's not going forward now. Let's try this again. There we go. So we also believe that our low nitrogen, high carbon, farm grown fertilizer results in deeply colored, just one sec here. I have to get rid of something that's in my way. I'm having trouble seeing. And just one second here. Let me see if I can get rid of this. Let's see. Hide the video panel. Yes, I got it. Okay. Oh no, it's back. Shoot. Let me see what I can do here. I'm having trouble reading my own slides because of this.
Helen, removing it might be a little bit harder fully removing it might be harder than just moving it out of the way, if that's possible.
Yeah, it really doesn't move out of the way. All right, I'm going to persevere on. I wrote too many things on my slides, but I'll just have to memorize it. So
Helen, is it the attendee list?
no, it's just the bar that, and actually I think I just got rid of it. So let's continue on. It was just the panel that gave me all the options. Okay, so getting back to this excitement about nutritional properties of our crops and how the way we manage our orchard affects it. My late husband and I believe that our low nitrogen, high carbon, farm grown fertilizer results in these deeply colored fruits that have high antioxidants that protect it naturally from insects and diseases and makes it more nutritious for humans. And what's really exciting is in about the last 5-10 years, there's starting to be more research that is starting to show that others are finding this to be true. So, in fact, in one study, lower peach tissue fruit nitrogen increased both fruit vitamin C content and resistant to brown rot disease. Isn't that a beautiful ecological synchrony, I think? And there's a very um, um, deeply colored apricot and our rich lady peaches that are just almost purple. So this brings me back to my new model, the new paradigm I have for organic farming, which is managing overlapping ecological relationships as well as just crops, managing the whole rather than just tweaking the parts, which 40 years ago was my goal, and I became very good at tweaking the parts. And of course, we didn't get to this ecological farming immediately. It took a lot of research and successes and many, many mistakes. And I just don't have time to talk about all the mistakes today. So you're going to get mostly the successes. And I'm going to talk about mainly what we did on the Oregon farm. But as I said, I'll throw in some things from especially the California farm too. So, once my late husband and I stopped having so much heated debate when I moved in and started farming with him, our discussions, our passionate discussions, led to these 10 principles for managing ecological relationships instead of just crops. And the first three you may recognize, they're not uncommon in other people's soil health principles. So feed the soil food web with as much crop and ground cover, root and whole plant above and below ground diversity as possible. Try and disturb the soil as little as possible. Create year-round refuges for above and below ground natural enemies and biological. I used to use the word control organisms, and darn it, Allison's going to hate me, but I'm not using that word anymore. I'm using biological suppression organisms, and I forgot to change it here. Number 3, grow a living root and feed the rhizosphere, that magic area where the soil, the roots, and the microbial community all meet. And then my husband and I really think that it's important, as we talked about it, to grow or obtain your carbon source where you are rather than importing carbon from a distance. Add organic residues regularly, not all at once in the spring, so that our soil microbial community feels like we do after a huge, big Thanksgiving meal. And focus on slow release carbon rather than fast release nitrogen. This is just vital in orchard production. It's important in producing annuals as well, but the more work we do, the more I realize this is just one of the top things for ecological orchard production. Recycle rather than import mined nutrients. We'll talk more about this. Selective fertilizer rather than fertilizing the whole orchard. Selective weeding. Choose a ground cover and chop and drop the plants that seem to be problematic in your climate and your system. And finally, maintain and create wild habitat as close to crops as possible. So Again, the thing that has really been most vital to us is no-till. Keep that soil covered with living roots with that extensive rhizosphere year round. And the way we do this is with a perennial living mulch, year round living roots with diverse species, growth forms, and root depths. This is a, a yellow dock root, and you can see how big it is, bringing wonderful things and helping recycle nutrients in our orchard. And then when we think about plant diversity, we want to think about it in terms of ecological function. We want to be able to support above and below ground beneficial organisms who interact to create natural pest suppression and nutrient cycling and recycling without off-farm inputs. And this is a place I've done a lot of on-farm research and other research over the last 20 years, and Allison mentioned it too, different microbial communities like different plant roots, and certainly different predators and parasites have their favorite plants on which they do the best. They grow and reproduce the best. So we want to not just have diversity for diversity's sake alone, but for ecological function. So I'm going to go into all of these components now in detail, looking at the farm in Oregon. We did very well on the orchard in California, and we made enough money to semi-retire to 211 acres. And we really wanted to push the ecological envelope and see with what we could get away with. Our goals were minimal soil disturbance, natural nutrient cycling and recycling, soil building, and a diversity of year-round living roots that provides all the habitat we've been talking about. And so here's the orchard, but I want to show you how it started and take you step by step through it. Oh, and there, my perhaps favorite all-time fruit in the orchard, if I have to choose, is Flavor King Pluot. And I want to say, because all ecological farming or homesteading is going to be locationally specific. So we want to know what climate I'm talking about, what environment I'm talking about. And mainly here, I'm going to be talking about this zone 5 to 6, relatively dry climate with 15 inches of annual precip and relatively dry summers. And the goals, of course, are important. If you're a big commercial operation, you will have different goals than what we were doing here on our smaller orchard. And we were trying to grow our year-round needs of nutrient-rich fruits and to eat a rainbow of plant family diversity and colors. And we wanted enough to supply 2 farmers markets a week and perhaps a little wholesale. This is my favorite all-time peach, Kauai peach. So our goal was to have fresh fruit for as long as possible. We started with strawberries, went to apricot, cherry, pluots, plums, peaches, nectarines, plums, apples, and pears. Candy stripe pluot. And here's the list that we can talk about at the end if you want. But this, I have to say, my late husband brilliantly put together, and it was spot on. We tried to have a ripening sequence that would supply, again, all of our needs and those 2 farmers markets a week. So this gave us about 5 to 10 trees ripening every week, and then a little bit of overlap so that I wasn't overwhelmed with harvesting. That may have happened to some of you. It certainly happened to us in the California orchard. So here's how we started our no-till orchard with our Grow-Your-Own-Fertilizer system that multitasks as both soil and habitat building. And we had this big, wonderful hayfield with surprising low fertility. They'd just been pulling all the hay off of it. So here's how we started to prepare. And you can imagine how the neighbors were talking, those Californians. But there's method to this madness. In the foreground, you see this unmowed living mulch, which gives us year-round living roots and undisturbed season-long blooming habitat for soil microorganisms, beneficial insects, and natural enemies. And we also have, the selective mowing of that living mulch for slow nutrient cycling and recycling, and only 50 to 65% of it is mowed or disturbed at any one time. So we leave that blooming habitat. And then we have hay mulch brought in from other fields pre-plant for the orchard. So again, going back to our ecological principles, we want to do selective mineral fertilization, not the whole field. So basically what we did is put phosphorus and micronutrients added to the tree hole only pre-plant, and no nitrogen fertilizer at all except that mowed and blown in living mulch. So my husband was a great believer in mineral balancing and convinced me, after seeing the California orchard and watching what happened to the Oregon orchard. He had been doing mineral balancing for 35 years in the California orchard, that minerals and mineral balancing are really vital to orchard production. But particularly, I became a believer after the heated debates that the mineral balancing within tree fruits is probably more important than nitrogen, particularly for stone fruit. So here's what we put down. And again, it was only about 9 square foot per tree, and only about 8% of the total land got these materials that have to be mined from somebody else's land. Soft rock phosphate, elemental sulfur, potash, manganese, iron, zinc, boron. Azomite and Nutrimin are clay compounds. With azomite has 70 different minerals in it. And then we put down our Grow-Our-Own-Fertilizer and weed suppression pre-plant, which was about 50 pounds of hay mulch applied to each tree hole. And after about 2 months, this is what it looked like. There's our suppression of that 50-year-old hayfield with all of its deep roots. And we pulled this back to plant the trees, and look at that gorgeous soil, full of earthworms, I might add. And then after planting, we have this perennial living mulch, and we want to somewhat suppress the competition with these baby roots on these young trees. So we would mow it. But again, we're doing the selective mowing, leaving a 30% unmowed microbe and beneficial insect habitat at all times. And because we were trying to figure out the economics of it, you can see that we would mow some areas and leave some areas less mowed and some areas completely unmowed. And the diesel for mowing turns out, for about 4 times a year, is about 10 gallons per acre. And the mowing allows us to mow selectively and leave areas that are completely undisturbed at any one time. So there's the first year orchard. We're looking at the peaches, and there's some sunflowers I planted. I really didn't need to, but I did. That's Helianthus annuus. And the cherry tree is just doing ridiculously well, as you can see, the row of cherries, sweet cherries. And then as the orchard matured, we continued on with our focus, no-till, year-round soil cover, in this case, perennial grass, clover, different clovers, and weeds, thank goodness for the weeds, living mulch, and regular surface application of high carbon, low nitrogen mulch throughout the growing season. We also have a diversity of organic plant residues with different carbon to nitrogen ratios and different timings. This is key, I'm realizing, as I continue to study microbial ecology and soil building. So we use the mowed living mulch and chip branches from tree prunings. And in our California orchard, we did quite a bit of measurement, and we would get approximately 1 to 4 tons per acre of mowed hay, dry weight, added to the soil surface each year, depending on how often we mowed and what kind of a growing year it was. And then we would also add the high carbon pruned branches to the soil from 1 to 2 tree prunings per year. And if we did the 2 prunings a year, we would also get sometimes higher nitrogen leaves also added with a summer prune. And then something we don't think about, but adding the organic residues regularly, not all at once, and not incorporated with any kind of tillage. And what others are finding now, some really interesting European literature I found the last couple of years, that just the fallen leaves that we add and then later in the year mow them into the soil adds lots of recycled nutrients. So there it is. There's that strange orchard prep 6 years later in 2022 with just really rather remarkable yields, I have to say. This orchard did very well with no off-farm nitrogen fertilizer except the mowed living mulch, and no off-farm mineral fertilizer since that application we did pre-plant in 2016. And I have to tell you, when I was in graduate school at Rutgers, I would not have believed this was possible. That looks like an awful lot of competition. It is a lot of competition. So why is it working? Well, here's what I think. What we've managed to accomplish, paying attention to the ecological details and managing all of the interactive relationships, is an effective balance and active soil microbial community activity that's then getting us optimal organic residue decomposition, nutrient cycling, and recycling. And in fact, with our measurements over the years, we saw improved soil health, water holding capacity, high soil carbon, and excellent soil microbial diversity and abundance on all 3 farms. And as we began to study this and do literature reviews and on-farm research, we realized that the microbial diversity and I think the beneficial insect diversity matters. We saw an increase in protozoans, and with this increase in protozoans, decomposition rates increase with more protozoans, particularly with high carbon materials, which is what we're adding. We saw an increase in fungi, including mycorrhizae fungi, who decrease with tillage and with cultivation. So there's our soil building, but it turns out that soil building also multitasks as habitat building for insect and disease suppression. So we saw increased diversity and abundance of wildlife and biological suppression organisms at Woodley Farm over time. And that, we feel, strengthens the immune system of the whole agroecosystem, looking at it as a whole. And again, focusing on suppression rather than killing, Because when you kill something in the system, you inherit its job, even if you didn't understand its job in the first place. I have to admit that I'm beginning to understand things that I monitored in the system 20 years ago. Only now, 20 years later, am I beginning to understand how vital what these organisms were doing in the system. And here's something that I did quite a bit of on-farm research with at my farm in Montana before I moved to California. I got some Western SARE grants and some Organic Farming Research Foundation grants to look at how close to crops does habitat needs to be. And I found that creating habitat as close to crops as possible led to earlier and increased numbers of predators and parasites, and hence no lag time between pest outbreaks and natural enemy buildup. So the increased predators and parasites and moving into crops early decreased our pests so that we stopped spraying even certified organic orchard sprays in 2013. But as Allison told us, this takes a lot of monitoring, and this was my main job in California was weekly monitoring of the pests, and I also monitored weekly predators and parasites. And here are some of the graphs from 2013 and 2014. And here you can see this peak of this guy, soldier beetle, and this was particularly on pluots. We had an outbreak of aphids. We basically, to be honest, aphids and mites were just kind of a curiosity generally in our orchard. Our main pests uh, um, um, are the big ones like codling moth, or were the big ones like codling moth and oriental fruit moth. But this one year in the early season, we had an outbreak, and then they were gone within 2 weeks. These soldier beetles came from seemingly nowhere, but came from the living mulch as we found them later, and really took care of the problem. And we also monitor with sweep nets the ground dwelling predators because we have learned, and there's some great work in Washington looking at spiders and how important spiders are for managing pests in orchards if you don't disturb them. They're the ones that you'll minimize most quickly if you disturb them with, God forbid, tillage and even with mowing. And here we have rove beetle and carabid beetle, and oh my goodness, one of my favorite wolf spiders, who is a real strong predator of codling moth when they're in their soil phase. And then the other important thing to monitor is weekly percent clean fruit. And I did that in the field rather than after we'd picked it to know where we were. If things got out of hand, we would increase we would consider possibly going back to spraying certified organic materials. And we didn't have to except one time with sweet cherries and spotted winged Drosophila. But generally, we were able to maintain about 90% clean fruit in the field, and that was what we called our 10% tithing to ecological function. So in other words, if you want an active community of beneficial insects, parasites, and predators, and we depended on generalists and our native generalists, then you have to give them something to eat. So, so we had to have some damage, and we were willing to put up with 10%. We actually made quite a bit of money the last 5 years in California with this 10% tithing to ecological function, but that might not be something everyone would be able to do. And as we got away from spraying materials, even certified organic materials, the ecological plot thickened. Woodleaf farm bird diversity increased. As we began to mimic natural ecosystems with no tillage and no pest sprays, birds began to nest in the orchard in large numbers, including this yellow warbler and his family. And what a worm eater he turned out to be to feed those voracious babies. And when birds began to nest in the orchard in large number, caterpillar pests on peaches and apples decreased, such as codling moth. So, no insecticide spraying, a focus instead on undisturbed, sequentially blooming habitat for our biological suppressive organisms all season, and soil building for tree and soil microbial community health. We have a no weeding system. Instead, we do selective mowing. In the spring, which is an important time for development of particularly our stone fruit pests, we try to have in the stone fruits a no-mow habitat. As we get closer to harvesting and when we want to get in there and harvest, we do a summer mow, but again, we're leaving that 33% left unmowed habitat. And the selective mowing, as I mentioned, is really vital because not only our own on-farm data, but getting to be more and more research around the country is that the predators and parasites really hate the soil disturbance. And so we really want to time our mowing for our habitat enhancement and for our nutrient cycling. Disease management, the way we've done this at Woodleaf Farm is that we really focus on resistant varieties and species and variety diversity. So we have a succession of varieties, not only to extend the harvest season, but we have mixed species and varieties in the same field, block, or even row, so that we just have as much diversity as we can. And this is this is my favorite all-time pear, Warren pear, which is also fire blight resistant, can be a little tricky pollinating, but in our system where we have all of this habitat, we had no problem. So also with disease management, really good attention to orchard hygiene, removing diseased fruit and mummies. During the season when our microbial communities were active, we would just take any mummies and, squish them into the soil. After the end of September, when things started slowing down, microbial activity slowed down as the soils cooled, we would actually remove them and put them in buckets and take them out of the orchard. And our pruning timing and tree size and shape, allowing as much aeration as possible. And of course, as I've mentioned, our living mulch mowing timing also helped us manage our diseases as well. But there's also another secret we have. We have micronutrient mineral mix bloom sprays, and I am still doing this on my own. But my brilliant husband developed this in the 1990s. And he would do micronutrient mineral mix bloom sprays 1 to 3 times during bloom, depending on the weather and the moisture. So the amount of precipitation, the humidity, and temperatures. So I will tell you what's in that mineral mix bloom spray, but I want to tell you how we got there. Well, I'm going to say how Carl got there. I wasn't on Woodleaf Farm when he did this brown rot suppression experiments. So these experiments went from the 1990s through the 1996, and they were funded by the Organic Farming Research Foundation. And Carl basically, there were just not very many options for organic orchardists in 1990. He tried everything. The standard was spraying a lot of sulfur. And some people, including Carl in the early 1990s, sprayed copper. But here are the first things he was working with: kelp, basalt rock plus kelp, another rock dust, compost tea, two different kinds of compost tea. You can see with kelp, molasses, the rock powders, finished compost. The second one had brewer's malt and fish meal. And then, very interestingly, he he worked with a microbial ecologist at University of California, Chico, which wasn't far from the California orchard, and they found a native yeast. And so they worked on utilizing that as well and spraying it on the leaves. Hydrogen peroxide, then this big blend of things. Azomite, which is the clay I was telling you about, plus kelp, the standard of copper and wettable sulfur, and my goodness, even grapefruit seed extract. So here is the 1993 results when he was getting it pinned down to some of the better ones. And in 1993, they actually had a lot of brown rot. It was really kind of problematic. And here's the real surprise. The best was the kelp and the basalt rock dust. And it was significantly better than the copper and sulfur that didn't do very well. At this point, they were spraying throughout the year and they didn't understand the etiology or the life cycle of brown rot. So these were not necessarily bloom sprays, by the way. So here are the surprising things: that the copper and sulfur didn't do well, that just seaweed and rock dust did the best, and that something I have done a lot of experimenting with, the compost tea and that native yeast were not a little bit better. So, just to make sure everybody realized that this Orobasidium pullens is a ubiquitous yeast-like fungus naturally present on leaf and fruit surfaces, and it was naturally present at Woodleaf Farm. In the mid-2000s, strains have been isolated from peach fruit, and they are showing some antagonistic capabilities against brown rot. And in fact, Blossom Protect contains a biological insecticide and fungicide that contains Orobasidium pullens, has been shown to be an effective biological control of fire blight. And we tested that on the farm in California against our mineral mix bloom spray. Actually, our bloom sprays did significantly better, so we stopped using Blossom Protect. So here's the 1994 study. Carl had, at this point, gotten it down to four main treatments: a mix, which was the rock dust, yeast, and kelp at the above rates, and then rock dust alone, the standard of sulfur, and the yeast. And by this time, he was getting pretty good management or suppression of the brown rot, getting closer to 90% that we wanted to be at. So Here's what's in the mineral mix bloom spray. Carl quit using so much, so he quit using copper altogether because he began to see some copper in the soil during our annual soil test, and he was worried. And he didn't want to use as much sulfur because in other experiments that were done at the same time that he was doing this brown rot research, he found that the sulfur greatly decreased that native yeast growing on the leaves. So this is what he came up with and what we worked on together when I moved on to the farm. And so the mineral mix now it does contain sulfur, but significantly lower rates than people use to suppress disease when they spray it alone. And again, depending on the weather. So in 2013, not much rain, 8 pounds. A little higher, 10 pounds with more rain, and when not very much rain and we were feeling really brave, lower, quite low amounts of sulfur. The kelp, gypsum, the azomite rock dust that I told you had 70 other minerals and trace elements. Iron, potash, manganese, boron, Nutrimin, another rock dust, and some spreader stickers. So, excuse me. Peach leaf curl is the last disease that we stopped spraying for at Woodleaf Farm. We were spraying that till even in Oregon. But again, what we found is that what I'm going to call the phyllosphere, which is like the rhizosphere, except on the leaves, this microbial community on the leaves, there are the bad guys and the good guys, and we were killing everyone when we sprayed our materials for peach leaf curl. So with fear and trepidation, I stopped spraying. And the first year, you can see we had some peach leaf curl, but it wasn't terrible and it diminished every year. So we'll see what happens. Remember, I live in the dry West, so probably not everyone could get away with this. And now I want to tell you what I'm doing on the new orchard in case we have people that are doing it at a smaller scale. I planted, crazily enough, peaches and nectarines and pluots in Montana, and no-till, only alfalfa hay, azomite, and seaweed. And then I did the regular mowing of the lawn in this particular case because the peaches and nectarines and pluots are in a very protected place between the house and the outbuildings with an 8-foot cedar fence to try and keep the Montana climate mitigated somewhat. And look at these trees in September. They put on 3 to 4 foot of growth with no nitrogen fertilizer at all. And they think that they're growing in California. They grew so well. On the outside of the fence, where they have to be a little tougher, I'm not trying to grow zone 5 and 6 type trees. I'm growing zone 4 and 5, sweet cherries and apples, but same thing, alfalfa hay, azomite, and seaweed. And they went in as 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch bare root trees. And again, pretty much all of these guys got about 2 to 3 foot of growth too. So I'm kind of excited that this grow our own fertilizer system continues to work in different climates where I'm starting these new orchards. And I inherited this 5 acres that I have is an alfalfa field in the midst of many alfalfa fields, my neighbors that surround me. And as I look at some of the benefits and problems of my new system, number one, I have a monoculture. So I'm trying to get more weeds to grow. I'm trying to get more species so I have a diversity of that sequential bloom. Because of course the alfalfa, if it's mainly a monoculture out there, it only blooms at one particular time. So that's the bad thing of just having too much alfalfa. The good thing I'm learning is that it contains plant hormones and phytochemicals that stimulate crop growth, improve nitrogen metabolism, and help plants overcome stress situations. There's some interesting research where they've taken extracts from alfalfa and looked at the different phytochemicals and found that it has really helped plants to suppress a drought. So I wouldn't wish upon anyone a monoculture of alfalfa, but it's certainly a good plant to have within your system. So I'm going to end with why an ecological system matters. Here's my little orchard when I was mainly a vegetable farmer in Montana in the 90s. Managing ecological relationships instead of just crops fosters soil and habitat building that results in crops higher in human healthy antioxidants, which in turn help crops suppress disease. And suppressing rather than killing insects helps to maintain native pollinators and natural enemies so that they can flourish and decreases human and soil microorganism exposure to toxic chemicals, even to caustic certified organic pest control materials such as copper and lime sulfur, which is of course what I used to use for peach leaf curl. The agroecosystem grown vitamin antioxidant filled fresh and healthy food we end up with grows healthy humans resistant to stress and disease too. And for free, we get the joy of sharing our farms and gardens with an inclusive, connected natural world.
We just leave that up for a second while we move into some of the other questions. And folks, feel free to jump questions into the Q&A here. So Janet has a question. Have heard keeping fallen leaves under fruit trees can increase insect and fungal problems. Have you found this to be an issue?
I want to tell you, no, I haven't, but remember that I live in a dry climate. And I also want to tell you, remember I said timing is key. So I've let the leaves fall. And then just before, well, as the ground starts to, as we get a really cold climate and or temperatures, and I live in a cold climate, which helps me. As we get freezing temperatures and as the ground starts to freeze, then I go in with a last mow of the year. Remember, I said I did 4 mowings, and one mowing is when I mix, like I'm mixing compost. Think of that. I mix those fallen leaves with the last mow of the living mulch, and we of course disturb our rove beetles and our carabid beetles and all of the soil dwellers, but they come back and over the season they work on those leaves and they are helping me then suppress some of the inoculum that will be on those leaves in my dry climate.
Okay, perfect. And if someone had a wetter climate, would you encourage the same approach or would you modify the approach?
I would modify the approach. How would I do that? So when I first started doing organic orcharding, was in New Jersey, 200 acres and 17 crops, going organic certification, going organic in 1 year, and they hired me to do it. What could go wrong? And apple scab could go wrong. So I, gosh, if I had just known what I know now 40 years ago, but I didn't. So I did mow as soon as the leaves fell, when and we didn't have living mulches, but we had some little bit of habitat in between the rows. That was when people were doing they weren't doing plants in the alleyways as much. And so when things were succulent and green and I could get any leaf fall decomposing faster, I did. But I have to tell you, we still sprayed a significant amount of sulfur 40 years ago for apple scab on those pioneering organic orchards.
And so now would you do more of the mineral approach to try and handle the scab?
Well, I'm going to say yes, and my caveat is that our we do the mineral mix sprays on our apples, and we do it mainly for fire blight. We see, a spot of apple scab every once in a while, but nothing significant. So, are we getting suppression with the whole system that we're doing, or is it just that we don't have heavy summer rains? I can't tell you, but I would certainly start there. And I think what I would do is I would move from just a mineral spray, because let me explain, actually, I don't think I did explain why we think that the mineral mix spray with things like the azomite, the rock powders, is working on brown rot. So brown rot, now we know, is most infective at that blossom stage. And if you can protect the blossom, then you diminish its significant its significance throughout the season. So what the rock dusts do is basically cover and protect the blossom from the spores being able to land and germinate. So here's what I think I might do. And I'm just talking totally off the top of my head. I have no experience with apple scab and using these rock powders. But I think that I would use, as we did in our IPM program, Integrated Pest Management Program in New Jersey, I would look at my apple scab infection periods, and I would have a mineral mix with maybe something like Surround early in the season, because as you know, it's hellacious to get off apples later in the season when you're trying to clean them up for sale. Early in the season, I would maybe add a little bit of Surround, but I would try that. And I would up the sulfur if we had heavier rain periods. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So your mission, should you choose to accept it, you people, you young people and young researchers, is to take a small area and experiment.
Okay, and so I'm having a little bit of success of also adding a bit of cobalt, organic cobalt into the tank to try and help the scab.
And
Some
I don't know anything about that. That's an interesting idea.
Okay. So Allison has a comment here. You're so absolutely spot on. Thank you. Glad to see that you love azomite as well. Thank you so much.
Oh, Allison uses azomite. Oh, very cool. Okay,
Uh,
I'm stopping sharing. Is that okay?
yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
And
It's
Peter,
weird to
sorry.
talk to you and not see you.
All right. um, and Peter asks, what is your view on biochar?
Um, Boy, it's funny you should ask. I'm I'm dealing with two conferences this weekend, and this morning I sat in on one of my favorite farmers' question and answer period, and someone asked him about biochar, and I hadn't known actually that he had done quite a bit of research. This is Ian Tolhurst from Oxfordshire, England, and he's been doing grow your own fertilizer for about 20, 30 years. Just really impressive work with coppicing trees and doing composting of cambial tissue, wood chips, and cover crops. And anyway, long story short, is that they were looking in their seedling mix at biochar, and they found no benefit when compared to their compost using non-peat materials, but using the composted wood chips. And in fact, in some cases, in some crops, alliums, one of them, they had a diminishment of growth with the biochar. So that was his results, which I thought were fascinating. And my own thoughts on a biochar is that unless you make your own, it's expensive, and I think there are other ways to improve soil health if you have the land to grow cover crops.
Okay, perfect. It is interesting. I've heard multiple people have challenges with biochar.
Is that true? You have too, because this was the first time I'd heard that. My adopted daughter did her PhD work at UC Davis, and looked at biochar and found some benefits and some non-effect. But I don't think she found any actual negativity. So that's intriguing to me.
Sorry, I hadn't heard about negativity. I just heard about it, multiple people not seeing any benefit.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yes, and that's more or less what she came to as well, with some benefits.
Eric Bina asks, how do you deal with weedy vines under and in the trees? Since one can't mow right next to the trunks without risking damage, and this area is where birds poop many seeds in my orchard, I get lots of poison ivy and Virginia creeper constantly wanting to climb the trunks of the trees and require time-consuming manual removal.
Shoot. Wow, that's the only time I ever had to deal with vines was when I stupidly planted them there. I was going for a food forest and I planted some blackberries on a dead plum tree in the middle of the apple orchard, and that was a really bad idea. So I understand what he was talking about. And basically, I hate to say it, I can't think of another way to do it except weed whipping very cautiously. Um, hmm. I'm going to think about that one. That's very interesting. It's not something I've ever had to deal with.
On that, like, are there times around the trunk that you'll try and manually cultivate or pull apart, or will you do like ramial wood chips around the trunk, or do you just, other than mowing, just let it be?
I don't do anything. Remember, I'm that 400 tree orchard I was showing you. For the last couple of years, I ran it virtually by myself.
Gotcha.
So I'm really working at, when I say low input minimalist, I'm very serious about that. But for other people, and particularly if you start with, let's say you didn't have a hayfield, which is what we started with. So even though the soil fertility was low and our microbial populations were not as diverse and abundant as they became, it wasn't as if it was, bare soil, right? So if people have more difficult situations, I have certainly recommended wood chip around the trees. And when Carl started his orchard in California, he had a hillside of deep clay. And so he did wood chips around the trees, and then clover, legume living mulches in between when he was just starting. So I do think that I mean, if you have a serious weed suppression issue or weed issue that needs to be suppressed, then you choose another ground cover. And at the moment, I'm trying to get this fellow's going to be disgusted, but in the middle of my big alfalfa fields and hay fields all around me, I have a 10-foot, or excuse me, an 8-foot deer fence. I am growing vines along my fence so that I can increase the diversity with just that monoculture alfalfa. And I planted Virginia creepers. But the Virginia creepers can't get out of control here because we have this thick ground cover. So here's what I would do now that we're talking it through. I think for the main germination period of the year, I would have a thicker mulch around the tree. So I would either apply it if it's not too big an orchard, which is expensive, or I would let my living mulch grow and then I would mow it so that it was heavy during seedling germination time of those vines. Um, you'd still have to go through and weed whip down everything, but I would pull it away or mow it away, which is what I do at the end of the year, as the ground gets, as we go into whatever form of winter you have in your climate, because we don't want to encourage rodents to be in that mulch right around the bark.
That makes a lot of sense. Yep, and I even have it dog-eared and highlighted the section you talk about the effectiveness of having the grass and that it does not outcompete you in your experience. But that doesn't
Well,
speak to the
I
vine.
do need to say, so 40 years ago on that farm in New Jersey, um, I just didn't understand microbial abundance and diversity. So I added a lot of compost and we put in a blueberry field, and it was our only failure of the year. They just got so outcompeted by the grasses and the yellow nutsedge that moved back in. Um, I didn't have the problem really in the orchards, but if your soil is not as fertile, if you don't have a good, strong microbial community, you're going to have to suppress weeds more seriously until you develop your agro ecosystem. How about we'll say it that way?
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Anonymous attendee asks, do you count having local leaf drop pile and arborist wood chips as importing carbon?
I don't think I do. One of my favorite new young farmers is right outside of Ann Arbor, and he's developed a reduced tillage system where they get all the leaves and all the wood chips from, well, not all, but a lot from Ann Arbor. And so it's a resource that at this point is not being utilized, and it doesn't take much to get it trucked to their place 4 or 5 miles out of town, and it's allowing them to have compost on the beds. This is vegetable production now. Compost on the beds, then leaves on top, leaf mulch on top of that, and the wood chips in between each bed. So I don't think I do.
Okay. I might be messing up the name, apologies. Detriquet asks, do you have any experience providing box type nest habitats for birds, such as purple martins, bluebirds, or owls?
Um, we haven't had to do that. We did a little, just because, bat boxes and some bluebird boxes, but it turns out the birds really like the trees better. You know?
Perfect. So you do provide them just in tree form.
Exactly, exactly. That's another funny thing. One resource for birds, by the way, is the Wild Farm Alliance has a wonderful, if you go to the Wild Farm Alliance website, they have a wonderful inviting birds and controlling pest birds, inviting beneficial and controlling pest birds. And what they say is, you need to provide food, water, perches. Well, in this huge, big open area that I put my orchard and put up my 5 acres of metal T-posts, I have so many raptors. And now I have nesting a pair of beginning to court, and we assume will nest here, great horned owls. And what they really like is not just the trees, but they love those fence posts to perch upon. So I don't have any experience. I haven't needed to. How about that?
We are following your one cat an acre suggestion for our orchard, and we do have birdhouses. And the other day I looked up and saw one of my cats sitting on top of the birdhouse.
Oh my goodness. Oh
So it's a
dear.
fully integrated experience. Naomi asks, also, if you could make a weedy and grassy perennial mixture that would be ideal for underplanting an orchard, what plants would you like to see in it? So I know you have a great answer for this because I'm literally on the page where you talk about it, but I will leave it for you to answer, please.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a really funny story. So you have that page. That came from all of the monitoring work I did while I was in California in our orchard. As when I was looking for beneficial insects, I also looked at what was blooming, right? And so I came up with that table. So we sold our orchard to young people in their, late 30s, early 40s. And they mowed more than we did. We explained about the selective mowing, but they were just more tidy. And so they mowed more, and they had chickens and goats. And so they made it through the first year beautifully. By the second year, they started having codling moth problems. And then they started having Oriental fruit moth problems. And then the third year, they said, we don't, where do we get bees? We don't have all the native bees that you had. And I said, what are you doing? And so they sent me pictures, and I sent them pictures back of the same place in the orchard, and they said, "Oh, all the weeds have stopped blooming early in the season." And I said, "Yes, you have mowed so much that a lot of species haven't gone to seed." And they said, "Where can we get that weed seed?" And so um that's such a good question. And Allison kind of was talking about what her favorite plants are. And I think that the long answer, and then I'll give a short answer. The long answer is to figure out what your main pests are, figure out what complex of predators and parasites you want, which is why I spend so much time on that in the book, looking at which plants specific predators and parasites seem to benefit the most from. And then I would design a mix for your specific place. That being said, I totally agree with Allison in terms of the composite sunflower family and the allium. And my favorite allium I discovered by accident. And then when I was doing my monitoring about 10 years ago, I realized, holy heck, parsnips that went to seed, and they were aggressive. They could seed in pretty weedy living mulch in my vegetable fields. They had the most parasitic wasps and predators. I just was overwhelmed by these big monster parsnip flowers and what they did. But of course, dill, um, my good friend Eric Brennan in California, who does, as Allison says, wonderful work. He did that alyssum work on a farm that I worked with quite a bit, and they used yellow and white dill. As well as alyssum. The problem with the alyssum that they're beginning to see, but as you said, the cat's on the bird nest box. So the I can never say that. The stink bugs, the bad stink bug, marmonated stink bug, also seems to like the alyssum. Ah, so I see someone saying what type of parsnip. It was just the my some of my vegetable parsnips. I think it was a javelin variety of parsnip. Uh, Went to seed and never went away in my no-till, reduced-till system. Um, so, Jesus, I was answering two questions at once, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Well, I think it's fantastic because you gave a great answer of what would be the ideal weedy and grassy perennial mixture.
That was what it was. Okay, I promised you a short answer. So I made a mix of dill and coriander, and the other one that for some reason they seem to love is and it's easy to get seeded in competitive areas is Coreopsis tinctoria, wildflower. So dill, um, Coreopsis. Um, coriander or cilantro. Um, well, I like my parsnip. And then the different clovers. Um, and we always have a mix of both red and white clover, vetch, uh, which can in some places get a little out of control, but vetch. So a mix. And then and then let weeds like plantain and your later blooming things like remember I showed you that yellow dock. Well, it blooms late in the year and then it seeds late in the year. And in September, I would go through and it was full of ladybugs and those soldier beetles. So I think the key is figuring out those plants from the composite and the umbelliferae and a diversity of sequential blooming. But that's a mix that I like. And of course, I like the legumes because remember that our seeding mix is we're always stacking ecological function. So we're always trying to have things multitask. And so isn't it nice to have different rooting depths and different microbial communities associated with the different roots? So nice to have legumes too.
That makes a lot of sense. And yes, on Allison's talk, I was feverishly writing down some that I need to add, and now I have some more. So thank you. One question for someone that has an existing orchard that maybe is developing or it's in production. If they currently have primarily grasses in the orchard, what would you recommend? Because I know the desire is to minimize tillage. Would it be strip till? Do you think you can broadcast overseed these? Like, what would you recommend for someone that already has a lot of grass in the orchard and wants to add these?
Well, so what I've done with some of the orchards I've worked with, uh, if you can borrow, because they're expensive, but no-till drill.
Okay.
Taking a no-till drill, and we have our county um, NRCS has a little, 4 foot no-till drill. And we've gone through and had really good success with alfalfa, sandfoin, and red clover
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
into mixes. And the cool thing that happens is that, ecologically, it's very natural for meadows and hay fields and orchards full of grass to go through cycles of regeneration where the grass utilizes the nitrogen and and then the legumes can be more competitive, and then and back. So sometimes you see grasses dominating, sometimes you see the legumes more dominant.
And don't get too excited about it. It'll just go through a cycle in some cases.
Yes. I do happily want to say that I just, between Allison's talk and mine, I took a walk around the orchard to get a little air. And I'm so thrilled to see that create habitat and they will come. I left, room around my trees as they're young, of course, not letting them have too much competition. And whenever I found weeds in the vegetables, I would, of course, let them go to seed and then I would take them and throw them in the orchard. And by God, I've gotten some nice weeds to compete with all that alfalfa.
That's fantastic. Yeah, Caitlin made a great note because you referenced Wild Farm Alliance, that there's a recorded interest group meeting with the Wild Farm Alliance. So just strong encouragement for anyone that's more interested, wants to go deeper on that. There is a recording on the interest groups from the Wild Farm Alliance folks. Uh,
Yes.
Next question. Oh, sorry, that we did that one. Answer live. That was that. A next question from Gloria is: I understand some vineyards will spray yeast from ferments to increase competitive advantage. If natural ferments from cider from a single orchard was used and put back into the system, would that be advantageous to the orchard? And if so, when is the best time to apply that?
Oh, that's really interesting. Um, well, I don't know the answer, but here's what I would, off the top of my head, say. It'd be interesting to hear what Allison has to say too. But I would do that depending on what you were targeting. So we know now from very good research at University of California and WSU that, for example, brown rot, if we can suppress the inoculum during bloom, that really helps. Um, that's not such an important thing in reference to apple scab, for example, but still helpful. We also know fire blight too. So I would find the best timing for the life cycle of the disease, and I would spray at that infective time.
Gotcha.
And
But
and
just
I
when it would
I'd
naturally.
I'd mix it with some of the minerals. For example, boron, we know from the literature, which is in our mineral mix, boron helps fruit set. So particularly on pears. So and maybe that's why we get such good. I suddenly realized because we don't have any problem getting fruit set on Warren pears. But anyway, um, I would mix some things in as well, and maybe not just do the yeast. But if I were experimenting, I would do what Carl did in the beginning and do everything individually and then start adding them together.
Okay, fantastic. Detriquet asked, you discussed planting diversity in rows in terms of varieties and species. Were there any species in your area that seemed to benefit from close cohabitation with others? I recall years ago seeing old standard apple trees used as natural scaffolding for grapes in remote areas of France and Italy, which apparently was quite common at one time.
Yeah, and that's why I planted my grapes and blackberries in the orchard for my forest farm. And, and at least with the blackberries, it was very ineffective. And my grapes ended up getting powdery mildew because the orchard was
Yeah.
just a little bit too much high humidity. Um, but I love the question. Um, I'm thinking back. Um, there are certain peach varieties, for example, that are more susceptible to peach leaf curl than others. So in the orchard in Oregon, we went to only 5 trees of the same species in a row, and then we would go elsewhere. It makes harvest a little more challenging. Uh, in California, we had 5 different fields, and then we had native oak pine forest separating those different fields. So we had 10 to 20 trees of each variety together, and then we would put 10 to 20 in a different field. So we had, and it was also good for climate modification because some were at the bottom of the hill, some were at the top. So, we always had some Kauai peaches because we didn't have all of them freeze out in one place. Um, so I think for disease it makes sense to mix, and the question of which ones would benefit one another. One of the ways that we managed spotted wing Drosophila was just as Allison was saying, it was the one place where we mowed the heck out of it in the spring. We wanted to have the least humidity. So when we planted the orchard in Oregon, we lined up species that had the same habitat requirements next to one another, and species that didn't get spotted wing Drosophila, we would plant next to the sweet cherries. And so far, there haven't been any in that orchard in Oregon. Little bit of Western cherry fruit fly, but very very little. So that's how I
It
would
definitely
think about
sounds
it.
like maybe it's not vines going up the tree because of some of the challenges with that, but something where maybe if you have something with SWD pressure, planting something else beside it, so you island the SWD and things like that, if I'm understanding right.
Yeah, I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Allison mentioned there's a great gal in Willamette, Oregon, that has a cool business, Rebecca Sweet, Buzz Seeds. She develops specialty mixes for farmers for pollinator cover crop seed. Check her out. So,
Excellent.
great shout out for Rebecca Sweet, Buzz Seeds in Willamette, Oregon. um, Next question is, how did you come about creating the fruiting orchard schedule? Knowing exactly sort of the sequence, so you would have a couple each week.
Mistakes.
Okay.
Lots of mistakes. As I said, Carl, in his 35 years of orcharding in Northern California, replanted uh, the whole area at least at least once. So he went through. So he had chance to to practice. And then honestly, um, we were in semi-retirement, and there are all these things that we'd always wanted to try. So so we just chose based on other people's ideas of what fruited for them at any one time. And I have to say, we got really good data from Dave Wilson Nursery. They have just been our trees into this orchard have always come from Dave Wilson. And boy, when they told us something, it was pretty close to spot on in terms of ripening schedule.
Okay, that's fantastic. I think we may be coming up on the last question here. Have you grown alliums between rows of apples or other fruits?
I have. Gosh, I wish I'd thrown that picture in. Carl, to entice me away from my farm in Montana, because he said his farm was bigger when we got together and I moved down and married him, he said I could have an acre of at the next close to the house. Of was mostly apple orchard. There were some figs and persimmons and uh, Asian pears and some cherries, but a lot of apples. And so that's where I could grow my forest farm and have vegetables. So every other row, so that we could get in with our harvesting equipment in the alternate rows, um, I did strip till and then no till vegetable production. And what really worked best, I have to tell you, was the alliums, onions. I did not try to do garlic. onions, fava beans, brassicas. We grow the most beautiful broccoli you've ever seen in between the apples. Um, oh, and then we did, the tried and true strawberries.
Awesome. Well, that was a lot of questions we peppered you with, but I think it means that there was a lot of interest in learning as much as we could from you while we had you. So, Helen,
And
thank you.
nobody asked me anything about varieties. I can't believe it.
I was surprised. Yeah. We had that at the ready. I was ready to put up that.
We did.
I think there's an extra 10 seconds if anyone really, really wants to ask about a specific variety.
Hey, this is Sean. Can you
Okay.
can you tell me what that nectarine was again at the very beginning?
Arctic Queen, and it has white flesh, and it's sweet and just disease and insect free. Oh my goodness, I love it. And of course, clients loved it too.
Thank you.
What's your favorite peaches that have the best leaf curl resistance?
Have the best what?
What are your favorite peaches that have the best leaf curl resistance?
Um, oh my goodness, just a sec. Just a sec. I might have to look that up in the book. Just one minute here. Um, oh, leaf curl.
Did you
Um,
grow Charlotte?
did I grow who?
Did you grow Charlotte?
I didn't. Is that a good one?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah, all right.
it's an old Oregon variety.
An old Oregon variety. No, I didn't. Okay, let's look here. Um,
While you're pulling that up, Gloria asks about Nanaimo peach. I think suggesting it's possibly a good one with peach leaf curl resistance and great flavor.
It is. I was just wondering if she had any non-standard ones besides like Frost, Nanaimo, that sort of thing.
yeah, there were, and I am just having a mental block. I may have to, for some reason, I don't have that under peach leaf curl. Oh, I know where it is. It's under peaches. Sorry. I'm I don't have everything memorized as I
Also, I
did when
do. It's on page 294 because I spent a lot of time in this book.
you are wonderful. I'm looking. Ah, 294. Okay. Do I have anything there? Are you already there?
Sorry, I'm there. I'm just trying to see.
Okay, so I'm troubleshooting pests. And I should have peach leaf curl. And then do I not say anything about disease resistant varieties?
Wilting, water.
Did I really not? Um,
I think it is somewhere in here. Sorry, I probably led us to the wrong section then.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to to get back to you on that one because definitely there were, and now what I'm coming up with June Pride, but now I can't remember if June Pride is more susceptible and that's why I'm remembering it, or more resistant. Um,
So there you go, Chris. It's an opportunity for you to try, and you'll find out if it's either great or awful.
no, 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 it's actually a great peach. It's in my top three, but don't grow it if it's the one that's more susceptible. It will come to me. I just don't have it at the top of my head. I'm so sorry.
I think it is unfair for us to expect you to have it at the ready. So awesome. Thank you so much, Helen. That was fantastic. Yeah, as I said, I love your book. I reference it all the time. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and all your experience. I know it will save a lot of us so much pain. So it's great. So thank you. On behalf.
Thank you. I will tell you, I will look this stuff up, not right now, but maybe tomorrow when it's raining, and I will send to Matt. Um, I will send you the stuff on the peach leaf curl resistant varieties or less susceptible, and you can send it on or post it somehow.
Well, that sounds great. So what we will do is because all these recordings go into the member section of NAFEX, along with any slides and any extra material. So I will put it there. So that will be the call to action for everyone to go there and find the list from Helen on recommendations. Um,
Yay.
So,
And thank you so much for all the work you do. I just love that we can find out all these nerdy little details and that everybody shares their experience.
it is awesome that NAFEX is close to 1,000 members strong and willing to share that, which is awesome. So on that, I'd like to thank this year's sponsors. One Green World Nursery. Use the code NAFEX, NAFEX, all caps, to receive 10% off on your order. Copenhagen Farms Nursery. Also want to thank them as a sponsor, and Southern Cultured Orchard and Nursery, Larry Stevenson. So thank you to all our sponsors. Once again, the recordings of the session and recommended variety list will be made available on nafex.org webpage in a few days and posted in about a year on NAFEX TV YouTube channel. There will be other downloadable content on our webpage for conference attendees as well. Don't miss the upcoming sessions. This is the end. This is the close up of the conference. Apologies. So I hope everyone had a fantastic conference, and stay tuned. We've got great interest sessions coming up that Sean's lined up. And of course, we'll have a 2025 conference as well. So please stay connected on social media. You'll find all those links on the nafex.org homepage. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night, everyone. And thank you again, Helen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. That was fun.
It was. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good night.
Do I need to do anything, or can
I will end it for everyone right now. I realize I'm now in the dark now that I see myself. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good day.
I've always been in the dark, but I'm going out into the light now. It's sunny and gorgeous here.
Oh, I'm envious. Okay. Well, have a great
Bye-bye.
day.
Thank you.